Hello everybody, this is Mackenzie from the Sewing Palace in Helena, Montana, and today I'm going to walk you through on how to bind your quilt with the L890 BERNINA serger, overlocker, cover stitch, chain stitch machine. So what makes a chain stitch machine? You have 5 threads that you can put through the machine. So you have some fun stuff. You can use decorative threads, specialty threads, and in this 30-minute video I will walk you through how to make this binding on any quilt that you can do at home. Okay, we're at the machine. This is the L890, and let's talk about the materials that you will need. So you'll need the C27, and then because I will be using the 4-thread overlock, I will have to use 4 threads, and then in the whichever looper that you're going to end up flipping the back over, you're going to switch one of these threads that you've used instead with the fusible Charlotte's Web thread. When I'm ready to turn it to the other side, I'm going to top stitch with a cover stitch or chain stitch. I will show you both, and then whichever one you choose you could do with a decorative 12 weight Aurifil thread. And then I also like to use the guide. This is the guide that snaps onto the machine, and it helps me from cutting extra off that I don't need to. So you'll show me adjusting this a little bit later. But let's get ready and set up the machine. The overlock stitches is in folder 1. And stitch number 1 is the 4-thread overlock with integrated safety seam. And I am in guided mode, which guided mode walks you through 100% of how to set up the machine for any stitch. So at first it says lift up your presser foot and then scroll to the next step. And then it does say unthread your left needle, your right needle, and your cover stitch looper. And the reason that it's saying that is because it knows the last previous stitch that it was on when I first turned on the machine. And right now I currently don't have any thread in the machine, so I'm just going to pass forward this. Now it's telling me to put the C11 foot on, but I'm going to attach the 27 foot. I'm going to lower the presser foot lever so it just snaps right on there. And make sure that this little lever, this lever piece is resting right on that little arch of the foot. And that's how you know that you have it on straight and it's on secure. And then it also says here, adjust your pressure foot pressure. And the pressure foot pressure is this little doggle piece right on top. And you want to make sure that the number that's facing you is on 4. So we're going to start there, and then it says insert your needles in the left needle and right needle of the overlock section. So the overlock section is in the back, and then these 3 here that are closer up front are the cover stitch needles. So on the screen, the LC, CC, and RC stands for left cover stitch needle, and then center cover stitch, right cover stitch, and then the LN is left needle and right needle, and those are just the standard overlock pieces. Okay, fast forward to the next step. It says activate your knife, and then if you don't know how to do that, you can hit the little video, and it's going to highlight with a yellow icon and show you what it's doing. Okay, so that's super cool. Almost every step has that function. And again, setting the cut length. You can kind of see that here as I'm moving it. This whole arm piece is moving left and right. So I'm going to set that at 6. Make sure that the cover stitch insert is on, which this is what that is, as well as activate the upper looper. I'm going to get the threads out. I'm going to open the cover here to expose where to thread, and then I'm going to pull to the right and lower it down, and it's making sure that this is activated. So to do that, I'm going to hit the video, and I have to switch this toggle so it's on the 1, and then I have to hit the foot control. It's going to make this little noise, and it's brought it up. You see there? And then it says make sure that the converter piece is locked down. Make sure that the overlock is on the O, because O stands for overlock and the R stands for rolled hem. So make sure it's on O, as well as the micro thread control is on 0. 0 is a good place to start stitch. And then it's saying, okay, now you're going to thread up all these paths. So in the 2 needles, which is the yellow and the green, I'm going to put the isocord thread. And I hit the green one to show you how it's going to want you to thread it. Now you're just doing overlock, so see how it's going right there. And the green is the right needle. So I'm going to put the green thread path through the right needle. Now in that front cover piece, there is this little accessory. If you struggle to thread needles, you would use this, the lower looper, because this will be upside down, my quilt will be upside down, and I want this thread to be on the bottom, because I will flip the binding over to the top, okay? But to start, I still have to sew all of my strips together, so I'm gonna put the isocord thread in all of the. Okay, this switch here is how you activate the air threading. And if you saw over here, when it's on O, they're open, and when it's on 1, they're closed. So now when you hit the foot control, so I'm just gonna get the end of the thread, and I'm gonna place it and hover it over the hole. And it just sucks it right through, and it came out through the upper looper. Now with this machine, it is still good to know what is what. So blue is the skies and red is the ground. And that is how I remember what's what. And there's the lower looper. Right here, and that's how I know that I have this butted up against even with the cutter. And the raw edges are together. Make sure that your needle is up, so that way you can't slide the quilt in. press your foot back down. Get the quilt all situated, and it's just a normal process. You're gonna stitch all the way around, and I'll show you when we get down to the corner what we do when we have a corner. One of the things that I really like about the serger is you see how it's cutting just a little bit off? It's cutting the frayed edges of both the quilt and the binding. If you don't like how much it's cutting off, that's what you would adjust down here on an L890. I'd say that it's easier to manipulate. I do feel a huge difference on how the machine is pulling the fabric through. And I have about 5 layers of fabric. You know, I've got a layer of batting, and I have some quilts on top and the backing, and then 2 another layers of binding. And it's sewing great. It's pulling evenly. On this machine, you can touch the screen, so that way when you stop sewing, the needles will stop down, which that's what I like when I'm sewing binding, so that way it doesn't shift on me. I'm making sure that all of the threads are pulled to the side, so that way it will get cut off. To the corner. There's the corner. Okay, so you know when you're doing regular binding, you want to stop about 1/4 of an inch from the end of the quilt top or quilt. You want to do the same here, so that way you have a good, nice angle on the front. So I'm going to stop, and you can either mark it with a marking pen, or you can just eyeball it. I'm going to eyeball it. Okay, and once I've got about 1/4 of an inch, one more stitch, I'm going to lift up the presser foot, turn the hand wheel so that way my needles are up, and I'm going to pull the quilt out. Cut the threads here. I don't like to have long quilts on my quilt, so I cut them right to the quilt, and now I'm able to form that corner, just like you would any other binding. Now if I had a pin or a clip, I would clip that, and then I'm going to turn and pivot the corner. A nice big table really helps, or if you have the machine in a cabinet, that will help to alleviate some of the pull that the quilt has. Okay, and then just like on a sewing machine, you want to start about 1/4 of an inch in. So see up here where my needles are, I have the quilt a little bit past about 1/4 of an inch where my needles are. You can do that on a quilting machine. You don't have to sew off the edge. And I've got my pieces ready, and I'm just going to go ahead and start. And this machine sews through the layers beautifully. Okay. I'm just going to go ahead and finish sewing all the way around. Okay, so now I have gone all the way around and I have about a 12-ish, 8-ish hole from one strip to the other, because now I have to connect the strips. I'm gonna cut them down so I don't have one side that has this long giant string of thread. And I have the quilt here on the side, so I'm gonna move you over. Okay, so you can see where I ended here, and I actually held onto the quilt, stopping it from feeding so that way the stitches were close together. Because on an overlocker or serger, you can't backstitch. Here, I just started. This is where I started, and this is where I left off. Okay, there's a couple ways to do this. I'm gonna show you this way, because I really like this way. I'm gonna cut about just a 2-inch square off of the binding strip, so it's the width and the length of the binding. I'm gonna lay the bottom one on, and I'm gonna butt up my strip that I cut with the edge. So I'm matching the edges here. Down. And I like to kind of stretch this bottom piece just a little bit. I'm gonna lay them down on top. And then the piece that is on top, I'm gonna lay it down right on top. And again, I'm giving it just a little bit of a pull. And then I'm gonna cut the top one so it's even with this strip that I cut here underneath it. And you could do this technique with if you were sewing regular binding too. Because now I have the two pieces, and if I was sewing the pieces together on a traditional quilt, not using an overlocker, I have the right piece to sew a 45-degree angle. So I would traditionally lay this down right sides up, and I'm going to fold the quilt in half so that way I have good access to the strips. Lay that one right side up, and then put this one right sides down. And it's the perfect size to sew from point to point. If I'm doing traditional binding, that's how I do my binding, and I sew here. Okay, but because I'm on an overlocker, I don't want to do a diagonal cut seam. I just want to do a straight seam. So I'm going to lay my quilt out, putting the right sides together, and I'm eyeballing here where they meet, and I'm pinching with my fingers here, you see? And then I would get a pin, and I would pin where my needle needs to stitch. And because I cut them, it's going to be straight across. And now I'm going to put that pin even with my left needle. And stitch down, just like we were sewing the piece.
Go over a little bit of where you stopped and where you started, so that way you don't have a hiccup. I'm going to slide this puppy right back into place where it should be. And I'm continuing just like I never stopped. And when I get down to where I began, I'm just going to slowly let it right off. Do some extra stitches and cut the extra off. Now I have a little bit of stuff that's off the quilt, that's okay, because I went over what I did before. So it's no big deal. And I'm going to cut the extra strips off, so it's a nice piece. Okay, so now I'm going to go over to the iron.
And I'm going to press and fold over the binding. So I'll show you here over here. So this is the side that has that variegated thread, the isocord thread. And when I go over to the iron, I'm gonna press it and fold it over on the other side. And my fold because my strip fabric is 2 1/4 is what I cut, it ends up to be perfect and covers all of the stitching, which is amazing. That is something that I like to achieve with my binding. So now I have it fused on the side, and as you can see, it's a beautiful fused binding. And it covered the stitching perfectly on the round, with my fabric being 2 1/4 inch width, and the corners turned out great. I did use a clip on all 4 corners to make sure that the points turned out and the fabric stayed for the cooling process. But now that the quilt is cool from ironing, I can take the clips off, and my 45-degree angle on both sides turned out amazing. So now I want to top stitch this. For some quilts, you can choose not to top stitch or to top stitch, but because this is going to be a quilt that the store is going to use, people are going to touch it, we're going to take it to shows and stuff, I want to make sure that I top stitch this closed. If it's just a wall hanging that you're doing, you're going to plan to put it on the wall and keep a quilt on the wall, you don't have to top stitch once you've fused it. So that's one of the amazing things that you can do with that fusible thread is, it's a little wall hanging that you just touch, maybe seasonal, to change out your wall hanging seasonally. You don't have to top stitch, so that's really great. So let's go back to the L890, and we're going to thread it up for a cover stitch. And we're going to go select a cover stitch. So the cover stitch is, you have to go as if you're going to go get a stitch, and then it's asking you, do you want to save that previous stitch that you were just on? And no thank you. The cover stitch is in file folder 2, and now you have, this is where the chain stitches and the cover stitches are. So I'm gonna choose the 3-thread cover stitch narrow, because I just want it to be narrow and I want it to go right on the binding. So I click that, and now it's going to walk me through how to set up the machine. when you're doing a cover stitch and a chain stitch on top, this is the top because where my needles are is the top. The top, you'll see 2 lines of straight stitching, and on the bottom, once we're done, you'll see the decorative thread with the cover stitch. Okay, I'm gonna stop and make sure that these threads go to the back. And then when you're stitching with a cover stitch, you never want to sew in the air. It's like against the rules when you're with cover stitching. So if I had my cover stitch converter tool, which I don't, I'm just going to use the needle screwdriver. I'm going to pull back to front the needle threads. There's 2 of them. You pull them to the front, and then you cut them. And then you're going to grab your project and you're going to pull it out to the back, and you're going to cut the bottom thread. So now here is the cover stitch thread, and this is what the top looks like. You see the needles. So that is what your top stitching would look like on this quilt if you did the cover stitch. This is what the cover stitch insert looks like. It has different markings, and the most markings are all from the center of the needle position of in the center place. That's what all those markings are for. Okay, I'm going to close all the doors here, and now we're ready to stitch this out. So let's get another stitch out piece here. So now with a chain stitch, you can stitch in the air. So I'm gonna start on the fabric, and then I'm just gonna stitch right off so you can see what it looks like when it's stitching in the air. I like to still hold my threads when I begin, and so the top of my piece has what looks like a straight stitch, and then underneath is where the chain stitch decorative pretty thread is forming. So there's what's underneath. So again, here is the chain stitch, the back and the front, and then this one is the cover stitch, the underneath and the top. place my binding end with this first hatchet here. And it will show up on my actual stitching on the back. So I'm gonna stitch a little bit and then I'll fold it over and I'll show you. Thank you for joining me today in finishing my quilt with the binding using the decorative thread, fusible thread, and playing around with the buttons and rethreading the machine multiple times. I hope you guys learned something and enjoyed it. Thank you so much for joining me and have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day.